Continuing on in our series of seeing interesting gun stuff in the news, this week, of course, lots of stuff going on in relation to the new year. And I read a story in USA Today about new gun laws coming into effect in 2025. It had a couple that were kind of interesting to me, so I figured we'd talk about it. Mr. Target is the sponsor of today's video. If you're looking for excellently engineered steel targets that will withstand thousands and thousands of pistol, rifle, or shotgun rounds, Mr. Target is my go-to resource. They've got self-sealing rubber targets too, and you can see us use them all the time on the Active Self-Protection Extra YouTube channel. Hit the link in the description to check Mr. Target out, and be sure to thank them for sponsoring today's video. So first of all, if you are following Active Self-Protection Extra, there's probably a pretty good chance you are pro firearms rights and pro Second Amendment. And so you're going to probably chew nails a little bit at the intro of this, where the first thing they say is they talk about there have been nearly 500 mass shootings in the US in 2024. And don't forget that, statistics don't lie, but liars use statistics, right? And their definition has changed so radically that a significantly proficient carjacker who runs out of luck and ends up shooting a bunch of, 4 people in a carjacking will, or a gang turf war ends up as being called a mass shooting, or a domestic incident, or stuff like that. When you think mass shooting, of course, you're thinking about, the real issues of somebody walking into a public place and killing a whole bunch of people randomly is what most of us associate with that. Clearly, there are far fewer than that. There's a few every year in the US, and those are lamentable, terrible, insane events that we should really, consider what the issues are. And I'm not saying that's not the case, but don't get sidetracked by that, okay? And of course, at the end of the year, the Biden administration says, oh, look, we did this stuff to prevent gun violence. Whatever gun violence is, first of all, for me, I think that phrase is meaningless, quite frankly. It's violence that we're worried about. We wouldn't talk about scissor violence. We wouldn't talk, we recently had a terrible incident involving a couple of them in the world, involving somebody plowing through a crowd with a car, and yet we're not going to talk about car violence. Those are silly, meaningless terms. So, anyways, back to the point here about this article. So, both sides are going to tout their things. We actually got a couple of interesting things here. I'm just going to look at some. I'll put some stuff up on the screen as well. In a number of states, we had some good stuff. So South Carolina and Louisiana in 2025, beginning now, are now constitutional carry states. That's pretty cool. And so we added 2 more constitutional carry states starting in 2025. Then they also had some anti-gun bills in Colorado, Maine, and New Mexico that were thwarted, that failed. So this is a very good thing. Now, where would you expect? If there anywhere in the nation where we took some L's, where would you expect? If you guessed California, you would be correct. Number one thing is they removed a loophole to allow somebody to buy more than one handgun in a 30-day period because, they had a loophole for private transfers and they closed that loophole. I think that's trash in every way imaginable, quite frankly. Limiting people's ability to buy lawful items is just, I don't understand how that is going to pass a Bruin test. A text history and tradition test, I don't know, but they did that stuff. They had another law that requires firearm dealers to provide consumers with a pamphlet covering the reasons for and risks of firearms ownership, quote, including the increased risk of death to someone in the household by suicide, homicide, or unintentional injury. I wonder if they are thinking about giving that to everyone who buys a chainsaw. If you go into your local hardware store and you buy a chainsaw, I wonder if they should be required to provide a pamphlet to people that show the benefits of chainsaw ownership, but also you have an increased risk of death for unintentional injury if you own a chainsaw. And somebody could definitely become a chainsaw murderer. We have a whole series of movies about this. And so you need to know those risks before you buy a chainsaw. I mean, that's just inane to me, but okay, that's the law. And also they just had another law that guides courts to expand considerations for a gun violence restraining order to include threats of violence, specifically hate-based threats. I'm not a fan at all of gun violence restraining orders in terms of if, if they don't provide actual due process, then I don't see how they're constitutional in any capacity. But they provided that. So California took a bunch of L's. That's not good. Here's an interesting one, and one that I know some folks here are going to get frustrated with. It's out of Colorado, and it requires secure storage in a vehicle. So any handgun stored inside an unoccupied vehicle in Colorado as of January 1st must be in a locked, hard-sided container out of plain view, and the vehicle must also be locked with a couple of exceptions. And I know some people are going to be like, well, wait a minute, that's up to me to do what I want. Guys, I really, honestly, I think this is just common sense for everyone to do. Now, I don't love laws that say these things. This is, okay, so let John put his, I'm kind of at my core, a wackadoodle libertarian hat on. Remember, every law at some level says if you don't agree, we are willing to kill you over this. And I know somebody's gonna go, John, that's not the case. It's just a fine. Okay, but what if I don't pay the fine? Well, then we're gonna make you pay a bigger fine. No, I'm not gonna pay that fine either. Well, then we're gonna throw you in a cage. I ain't going in your cage. Now what? Well, now we'll kill you. So at its base, at the end of everything, if you're not willing to follow that law, there is a threat of death behind that. And I know you're gonna argue with me on it, go ahead. But man, I don't love laws that require people to do things, even things that are common sense. I think nobody should leave a gun in a car that is not locked. That's the number one vector of felons getting firearms, is out of cars that are unlocked and guns that are unlocked. And I think that is garbage. And now Colorado requires it, that if you're gonna leave a gun in an unoccupied vehicle, it needs to be in a locked, hard-sided case out of plain view. That's an interesting one. I would further tell you that that case needs to be somehow connected to the vehicle in a way that it can't be taken from the vehicle. So I would say, it needs to be probably under your seat with a cable lock connecting it to the frame of the car. That's what I would do personally. So there's that. And also, later in 25, Coloradans who want to apply for a concealed carry permit will be required to complete an 8-hour training class, which includes a written exam and a live fire exercise as of July 1st. And it also prohibits some people on misdemeanor offenses from obtaining a concealed carry permit if the misdemeanor happened within 5 years. So that's kind of an interesting thing there on that part. I don't know if they mandate exactly what the class has to cover or not, but you Coloradans better check that out. Interesting, New Hampshire expanded gun rights. A couple of interesting things. They had a bill that expanded privacy protections by prohibiting the merchant code. So this was one that, I don't know if it was 24 or 23, there was this big kerfuffle about credit card companies having particular merchant codes for firearms retailers, and requiring those, but there are now like 10 states that prohibit the use of those codes. So there's a conflict in federal law and in state law in these issues. And so I don't know how the companies and the states and the governments, the federal government, are going to rectify all this, but it's illegal to use those in New Hampshire. So that was a pretty significant one. Let's see, a couple of other ones. Serious mental health information to be reported to the federal background check system for firearm purchases. That was thwarted actually in the Senate. And Kentucky did ban that merchant code as well. A couple of other interesting things. Minnesota passed a binary trigger ban, which went into effect on January 1st. So a binary trigger pulls, when the trigger is pulled to the rear, it fires a round. When the trigger is released, that's considered another action. It fires a second round. And in Minnesota, those are now illegal. In Delaware now, a university is also considered part of a school, and therefore in Delaware, it's now a felony offense to possess a firearm on the campus of a college, university campus. I don't love that, but again, now in New York, starting on January 7th, a firearms dealer has to post signs warning consumers of the risk of gun ownership. And New York is also implementing a statewide registry of extreme risk protection orders, which bar someone from owning a gun temporarily if they're deemed at risk to themselves or others. I don't like extreme risk protection orders because they deny due process. We have due process for a reason. Expedite due process. Say, hey, if this is an issue with firearms, we will expedite due process and get due process done. Because why? Because due process is an enumerated right. It's the Fifth Amendment, friends. Fourth Amendment, 10th Amendment. Due process is a big deal. So, we had a couple of wins and a couple of losses at the state level, nothing really on the federal level going into 2025. I don't mind the Colorado law requiring lock boxes, actually. I think it's common sense to not leave guns in unlocked cars. I applaud the new constitutional carry states. I think every state in the union should be a constitutional carry state because the right to keep and bear arms is in the Constitution. Therefore, it should be the law of the land everywhere, and also for visitors in your fine states as well. And I hope that gets up to the Supreme Court in 2025, 2026, and eventually under the Bruin standard, we're going to do that. I've been thinking about discussing the Bruin standard and how there's an interesting kind of tie-in between Heller, McDonald, Bruin, and what I was taught as a biblical scholar in seminary. So I'm interested to know if you're interested in that discussion, if I should post it here, or if I should keep that over on my public figure page where we talk about Bible stuff more, on my personal page. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Was this interesting to you? Let me know. Download the ASP Unlimited app for all the content you love from active self-protection and more with no interference from YouTube. No ads, no age gates, exclusive videos, seminars, classes, and more on iOS, Android, Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, and Android TV. Hit the link in the description or download ASP Unlimited from your app store today.